All right, we got Joe Williamson here. I don't even know if everyone knows that you're from Missouri, to be honest, but Missouri wrestler from Blue Springs, formerly of Flo Wrestling, currently of GRO Wrestling. So just a wide variety of experiences. So first off, Joe, tell us what you're doing now.
What I'm doing now. So about a year ago in January, I moved back to Kansas City area from Austin. The state tournament before that, Jason Heslop he got in touch with me and we talked a lot during the tournament. He'd been running a bunch of wrestling events, and I think with a whole other job, full-time job running a business, the events were growing, and they needed a little bit more energy. So he asked if I was interested in coming up to run those. It just was like perfect timing. I needed something, and I was ready to be back in Missouri. I was away for 10 years, and so had a new kid, wanted to be by my family. So moved up here to start running those events, and I've always loved doing content, and so that kind of worked perfect. I figure I can get back into content, build a community, and then that'll be a good place to market the events and build support that way.
So going back a little bit, obviously you have kind of a long history doing the content with Flo. So, and you kind of got in on that way early on, obviously, right? Like you were one of the first guys. So how did that come to pass? I mean, how did you get hooked up with Martin Floriani, or how did you transition from college into being a part of Flo Wrestling?
Yeah. So after college, I have a degree in education. I was going to be a teacher, but I was always a little fascinated with firefighting. So I moved back. I was actually living in the same place I am right now, and went and got my firefighter 1 and 2 and my EMT at Metropolitan Community College. And I had just finished that and was getting in the hiring process. And Ben Askren, who I wrestled with in college, and he's a good buddy. He called me up and he said, Martin Floriani, the guy that does Flo, is looking for someone to take over wrestling. And that sounded great. I knew what Flo was, but I didn't have a great idea of what it was or where it was going. So I talked to Martin a couple times, and then he drove through Missouri, and we met up at Einstein Brothers Bagels and chatted. And man, when he got there, this time, this was January 2008,
Mm-hmm.
and he had been running really hard since the end of 2006, and just nonstop. And the guy's kind of crazy, but he showed up at this place, and he was dirty and stinky, and he could hardly keep his eyes open, and had trouble getting his thoughts out. And I was like, dude, this guy is on drugs or something. Now that, once I got to know him, I just realized he was probably going 2 days straight, just completely exhausted. By the end of the conversation, we decided, I was still interested, and, I kind of had to go through like a trial process. So I met him at the NCAAs in 2008. They were in St. Louis, and really just got thrown into the fire. I remember he gave me a video camera. He's like, go. Like, I never turned on a camera before. I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never done interviews, and just learned quite a bit throughout that event. And then I traveled with him to High School Nationals, then Reno Worlds, and did coverages there. And at that time, it's interviewing kids and doing like video and matches and doing play-by-play, and it was totally new there. So it felt kind of funny sitting on the side of a mat, doing commentary, which I didn't have experience in either. But I got through those 3 events, and he almost like on the flight home from Reno was like trying to talk me out of it. And I decided this is really cool. This is unique. This is a way for me to stay close to wrestling, which is a huge part of my life. So came back, packed up, and headed down to Austin. And actually, I'd gone down in between coverages, went to Austin once before to meet everybody. And in my head, it's like, I'm going to walk into this office, like the Flo Cast's office, and there's going to be like a secretary, and there's going to be cubicles or something. Well, they picked me up from the airport in this car that could hardly run. It was Martin's brother. And then we pull into this neighborhood that's just, it's kind of beat up. It's on a little rougher part of Austin. And we pulled up to this house, like some chickens walked across the road, and walk into this place. It smelled bad, and dude came, said hi with his shirt off. It was nothing like what I expected. I remember thinking like, oh, my mom would be really upset. Like, I just went to college, graduated college, and then did this other thing. So yeah, it was super raw. And from there, it was like traveling just about every weekend and kind of finding my groove, which took a while. Some of the times in the plane, I was like so nervous because I didn't know what I was doing. I wanted to perform well, that I just didn't even care if the plane would land. But yeah, and then I did that role with Flo until like 2014, doing that content and coverage stuff. And the company went, I think I was like the 7th person. By the time I left, there was about 300 people there, and the culture was just way different, but a lot of really cool experiences. Got to meet a lot of cool people.
I've always kind of wondered this, because obviously if you're like kind of like a wrestling nerd like we all are, you wonder how people get different ways. But what was Martin's like skill set? I mean, what is his is he just like a really smart guy? Is he like a technology guy? What is he, a media guy? What's his?
He's just got fire. I talk about the Martin then and the Martin now, but at Flow Sports, no one worked harder for Martin, and that was from day one when I got in there until when I left. He's just always thinking about it, always forward motion, and as time passed, he started to look at data more and try to really understand what's going to drive the business, and especially when they decided that the subscription model was good, then things took a turn that way. But I just say just energy. He's really good at getting people to believe in something, and then just found ways to keep us moving. It was pretty tough. I remember, I'd come across people and they're like, man, I'd love to do what you do. I'll go hold a camera and film matches, and just like, you have no idea. There's a lot of that, but it was a ton of travel. It was staying up late and trying to get your video for the next day, go to a studio show the next day. And at the early times, it was like you wear all the hats, not just that you're filming matches, but learn Photoshop so you can make the banners, kind of understand the backside of the website, organize your trips, do everything on no money.
Yeah. People, I actually used to work at Blue Chip and did events and stuff there. And I remember people would always say like, man, I wish I had your job, just traveling around, going to wrestling tournaments. It's like, guys, it's work like anything else. I think people who like wrestling just see jobs in wrestling. They're like, oh, that would be, but there's a lot of work that goes into it. That's not just hanging out at wrestling tournaments. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, especially in a sport like wrestling, like, it's growing, the economy's growing in the sport, but it's not like there's a ton of money in the sport. And the other part, everybody thinks everything should be free. So you really have to grind and then figure out ways to get smarter to make it work. But like you said, it is a job. Yes, you're around something that you love and the people that you love, but it's a lot of work. And as I'm learning now doing events, man, that's hard. I'm still very early on and trying to figure out how to make them better.
Yeah, there's just a lot of moving pieces. And like you said, people I think of wrestling like every other sport, but wrestling is not a sport where money is flowing freely all the time everywhere. You know what I'm saying? And kind of like you said, the struggle is wrestling people expect things to be free, but you know, things cost money to do business sometimes. But that kind of leads me to my next question. I was going to ask you, kind of, this may not be that linear of a path we're going on, but with your experience in like the wrestling media side, so now you've got Rockfin, you've got Flo, and obviously Track is doing they do some stuff for free. They have some stuff that you can subscribe to. But what do you think? What direction do you think wrestling media is going, or wrestling content is going? Is it all going to someday be on like one platform like ESPN Plus, or is it going to be all these multiple different platforms? Is it going to be something you have to pay and people create it, or I don't know, where do you think it's going? It seems like it's going a lot of different directions right now.
So I hope that it never goes to one place. I wouldn't, I just think competition is good, and it's going to bring a win for the wrestling community. Like, if you remember, Flo used to be the video and Track used to be the software. And when each of the other ones invaded that space, you're forced to be innovative, you're forced to grow, and then you are forced to compete with what you charge, what you charge for your service. I do think, at least it seems like right now, subscription and pay-per-view models are a thing, and I believe that they're good, just because, at Flo, in a couple years, once the subscription model came, then so many more events, so much better production quality. You have to have some money coming in, otherwise everything's going to be stagnant or poor quality. But at the same time, it's important that there's content accessible for free. So, otherwise you can have a problem where it's just only diehard wrestling fans. We need to get new eyeballs on the sport. Nobody's ever just going to pay for something before they know that they love it. I believe that wrestling's the kind of thing that once you're around it for a little bit of time, it's going to hook you. And you're gonna wanna be around it more. You're gonna want to see more, and just build that fan base.
This is kind of the wrestling fans question to person that worked at Flo. So you can give the background idea of this, but it's hard. There's stuff going on. But had you when you were working at Flo, did you ever have that moment where, I think everyone has this experience where people are watching a live event and the live stream drops or something like that? How much of an apocalypse moment is that when you're on the other side of the camera?
I mean, there's several things I could talk about here. Early on, now Flo has support, and things can still go wrong, but if something goes wrong, there's somebody else on the back end figuring it out and working through. Some of the first live, I did the very first live event for Flo. It was Cornell at Penn State. It actually went okay. But we had this backpack, and it would act as internet. And so you could stream one mat live. And it was like, I remember when we used it, it was the greatest thing and people were pumped. But then you go to an event, you're pumping up a certain match or finals, and man, that thing just stopped working always at the worst times. And at that time it was free, but just to rip your heart out. Like, everybody wants to watch this Jordan Oliver final at Reno TOC, and it went out. Messages are coming in. What do I know how to do? I can turn it off and then turn it back on. And if it doesn't work, then you're just screwed. Other side, like I said, when you do have support, things can happen. I'm sure you remember the Penn State Oklahoma State match.
That's actually the one that stands out the most, because we had a bunch of people together to watch it. We had several people, and it was like, and then it went out. It's like, oh, yeah. That's a bad day for everybody.
I was actually, any other day I would be at the event, but I was actually in Blue Springs. It was a wedding party. Yeah, it had to be. Not, I was thinking, is it a wedding shower or a baby shower? But I actually got the, at that time I was doing rights acquisition. I wasn't on content anymore. And that was, I got that contract. Also, the first NCAA contract that Flo got was with Oklahoma State, and that was one I worked on. So I was sitting in the backyard with friends and family, and then I just start seeing messages all over all social media, and my stomach dropped. And then somehow, my boss is on the phone with me, like ripping into me. I can't do anything about it. And what actually had happened was so many people were logged on at the same time that it just cracked. The Flo had never experienced anything like that. It was just the most high demand event ever, and made a whole bunch of changes after that. But just something out of your hands, out of anybody's hands at Flo Sports even, I don't really understand the problem, but it's not something that you can just flip back on. But it's really hard it was really hard. You work to build something good and the intentions are all right. And Flo didn't want that to happen, but just everybody hates you really fast, or a lot of people. And,
yeah, the reaction was
there was
strong.
some frustration at our house for sure.
Oh yeah. And I can totally understand. It seems like things are getting better. It's still kind of early on and in streaming and stuff. Everything's getting better and people are understanding it more, but a whole lot goes into it. I know when I left Flo, before there's a stream, 50 people have their hands in what's going on and organizing different parts of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, nothing worse than being excited, having a bunch of people at your house for what's going to be the most exciting duel of the year, and now you're resorting to Twitter for results.
Right.
Yeah. It's kind of like we're both teachers. It's kind of like when you have like a great assignment planned out, you got everything ready on the computer to show it, and then the overhead doesn't work or something. But that's more like times 1,000 for you guys. But yeah, I was just wondering. I wonder what that felt like from the other side. I was going to ask you. Obviously, you traveled. Actually, I'll finish with this question more so. I'll ask you a question first. This week, me and Jesse have been talking about a lot, but obviously you still follow what's going on with all the everything. Kind of a essential question came out, and I'm a little bit of like a journalism nerd, but I'm not going to shout anyone out specifically, but the Flo guys, one of them said that he wasn't a journalist, and that was fine, but that kind of got a big reaction. So from someone who was working there and was in that side of the business, I mean, I guess, what is the role of those guys? Because are they journalists? Are they just kind of promoters of the sport? I thought it was kind of an interesting question because fans were kind of backlashing about the Flo guys not being journalists, not asking the hard question or whatever. I know it's a tough situation because you're trying to work with these coaches too, but I don't know. I was just going to get your take on that. Whenever you were involved, how did you view yourself, I guess? How did you view your role in light of that?
Wrestling fan. I can't speak for all the other Flo websites. I don't think anybody has a background in journalism on the wrestling side. In fact, when at the beginning, there was one guy that came out of Missouri's J School. His name was Garrett. He was the only guy that had any experience in journalism. Martin was just finding people that were really passionate about the sport, that understood the sport, and could hustle and work hard. And it was important that we could be in a wrestling room full of wrestlers and blend in and then be comfortable, not like them thinking some outsiders there. I wouldn't say that. I think they do a pretty good job of asking hard questions. And it's changing a little. I think we were a little softer before because it was a little bit scary maybe, but it's good it's important to ask the hard questions. If you watch any other sport, those are the first ones that come out. But wrestling is a small community. You got to maintain your relationships so that you just have to have a balance there to keep your relationship, and then also, get the information that people want to hear.
Yeah. I thought it was just kind of an interesting discussion that kind of exploded on Twitter that one day. And, I get it because you got to keep those relationships, obviously, because you're going to be going back to those people, obviously, asking for something. So it's kind of a tough balance. But
yeah, I'd say, they're reporting. They're reporting on wrestling. So, there's a journalistic aspect to it for sure.
Well, as you guys, or as it's grown, I think that the roles have changed a little bit too. Like at first it was just kind of like getting us inside looks, and maybe there weren't as many interviews and things like that. But it's definitely, I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I think it's definitely kind of transformed and continues to evolve as it goes too. So
yeah, when in 2008, and for several years, it was like, especially with the budget, you take what you could get. Like, I remember, all right, I want to go to Super 32. How do I get there? Hit up NC State, hit up UNC, hit up Duke, try to find a way for them to, can you get me a flight and get me out there? I'll do a coverage for you. And then can you get me a flight home? I'll come do a coverage for you. You get good content, and get to Super 32 and do that coverage. There was a really good side to that though. When we couldn't afford hotel rooms and things like that, it ended up meaning, stay at Tom Ryan's house. Anywhere you go, you're finding a bed to crash on, or you're sleeping in the back of a car. And wrestlers are great and always cool to do that. And it meant that you really get to know people. You become friends with people. You can get cool videos behind the scenes. The head wrestling coach cooking you pancakes for breakfast or something, and talk. You just get a whole different side. And so you build that relationship, and then access becomes easier and easier. And then, getting an interview when a coach is hammered at NCAAs, they got another match coming up, and it's a stress, you're more willing to get access at tough times. And it's just right. Because those relationships were built. And, that's not how they do it so much anymore, but because they don't have to. But there's some aspects to bootstrapping that help you a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not crapping on what they're doing now, but Jesse will vouch for this. I was trained up in basically wrestling by watching Flo videos for like 5 years straight, like 8 hours a day at my job. And I really did enjoy the content, probably more back then when it was more like guerrilla, media coverage than like the nothing against what they're doing now, but
yeah, it was super raw.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I missed that. So I missed several things that I miss. Those days we were forced to be creative because the goal at the early days was one piece of content a day. Obviously, if you're at a coverage, you're going to upload interviews and stuff, but that means you're traveling every weekend. Otherwise, you're screwed. But so there'd be days you wake up and you're like, what do I do? Like, I don't have any content. And, I lived with Bader at the time, and we're forced to do one of those goofy videos, find some old video and do something fun with it, or go run around Austin in our singlets and wrestle in weird place, and videos like that Don't Be That Coach and Flo Wrestling culture. There's so many of those shenanigans. We called it Flo Shenanigans at the time, and I thought it was something that we did really well. You don't see that too often anymore, and it's just not that raw. That now you see there's 3 cameras going, a professional editor, things like that. Oh, I had something else to say about that. Oh, the other piece that on Flo, obviously and this is what gets the views. You don't see a whole lot more than Oklahoma State, Iowa, Penn State. It's really zeroed in on the highest level. And again, that's, what the most people want. But there's stories all over the place. There's stories in every youth club. And I think, it used to be that there was coverage of that stuff and new coaches were made. Like Mike Malanconico, Mike Mal was just a club coach in 2008, and I think he made a personality out of himself on Flo. Same with like Cliff Fretwell and Lee Roper. And look, they grew into like being big personalities in the sport and doing really cool stuff. It doesn't always have to be Jordan Burroughs or Kyle Dake to be cool, but it does maybe to drive a business.
Yeah.
I talked about this with James before, but it's just kind of to your point about how there was a little bit more broad content. But I've talked about this with James before. I think that the onus is almost a little bit on the college coaches now to ask them to come out, or to get them out to their place. So I live in Arizona now, and I talked with Zeke Jones's kid's going to go to my high school next year. So I've talked with Zeke, and I was like, that's like the best way to promote your school, is to get those guys out here and get those videos up. And I think the onus is on them now a little bit, to get that. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, but I think it's one of the best ways to promote your school and build the sport too, is by asking them to come out and putting them up somewhere and getting that done.
Yeah, I think it's a little more difficult now. Mm-hmm. Like I said, they have stories and events they want to focus on, and really, if there's a live event coming up, they need to be pumping that event up. So they're going to cover those schools or matches with those athletes because that will get subscriptions. But that kind of opens up the door for someone like me. I'm still growing and not the most valuable place to put your content, but it'll be exciting when more universities and more clubs reach out and are interested in coverage. And I'm really excited to do that stuff. The last, since I moved up here, the focus has been more on the events, just because, like I said, I'm raw. I need to learn a lot. I need to build out a team and become more efficient. But the content is where I want to put a lot more time and focus, just because I love it and I think it's important.
Yeah. I think talking to other coaches a lot, the stuff that unfortunately maybe doesn't make the money. I don't know if it does or doesn't, honestly, but coaches love watching those college teams practices.
Yeah.
Or not even just like maybe not even a college team. I've learned so much from watching practices on Flo from different people, because you just see different ideas for practice, but you see different styles of coaching, everything. So, I mean, I wish there was more of that out there again. Me and Jesse both talked about, we go back and watch like old videos sometimes of practices that were on Flo from, 10 years ago or whatever, but still get ideas and everything.
Yeah. So, I could tell you what my thoughts are is, same thing. If you watch a video, if Flo were to go to Oklahoma State and put a video of a workout together, it would be like a really cool, slick video, made more for like TV. It would be quick clips and just something that visually looks cool. Before, when it was like me or Mark Bader out there, we don't know, all we know is what's good wrestling, and we know what sounds good and what wrestlers want to hear. So the video is probably longer. It's probably a little sloppier, but we're not going to cut off in the middle of this cool scramble that's going on, or we're going to leave the camera rolling longer so that you can hear the full message that John Smith is saying. It was very much made for wrestlers, but just because like we didn't have journalism backgrounds, videography backgrounds. This is just what's cool to us, and what was cool to us is cool to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. This can kind of be where we wrap this up because we talked for a while, but so out of you got to travel some cool places. You got to be around some cool people, obviously, and go on lots of cool trips. What are some of the experiences you had traveling to the different tournaments and the different countries even and stuff you traveled to that stand out to you from that time?
Well, I was lucky that I went to Russia, I think 7 times. And that was not just like I went to St. Petersburg, I always flew into Moscow, but places like Kazan and Volgograd and Krasnoyarsk and like just really different parts of the world. So saw a lot of interesting culture and different fan bases. So, Russia is like a really close to my heart. I feel like I really want to go back. The first trip was in 2008. I talked about this with Zeb the other day. For the money reason, that was Russian nationals. So I went there. If I go back and look at what I recorded there, I know so many guys that I know now. But at the time, since that wasn't happening much, I knew who Saitiev was, and I knew who Dudayev was. And, guys like Gatsalov is wrestling there, and Georgy Katoev, just an amazing amount of people. But when I showed up there, I had like $250, and then I had a bag full of wrestling shoes. The reason I had those was a guy named Steve Silver. His kids wrestled at Oklahoma State. He's like a furniture guy in Texas. He gave me those shoes to take to a guy named Maxim Milanov. He's coached the women's team here in the United States before, and he's from Ulan-Ude, kind of like by Lake Baikal. But I showed up with a bag of shoes to give to him, like 100 pair of shoes, and he's going to help me get from Moscow to St. Petersburg. And that first trip, I was alone and scared. It was very early on in Flo. I still, didn't know really what I was doing, and I knew it was super important. But then I got to go to like some wrestling workouts in Moscow and then in St. Petersburg, and this is their Olympic, not their qualifier because they picked their team. But that trip was very important to me. It was a huge learning experience, and I grew a bunch from that. I saw great wrestling, and I think for Flo at the time, it was something new. It was new for everybody, and I think really helped Flo grow and put them on a different platform than any other wrestling coverage. And then 2 other ones that stick out. Denmark in 2009 was great. That one, my dad went with me, and so made me feel really cool. Watched Jake Herbert make it to the finals, and he beat Gadisov in one of the coolest matches I ever saw. And then the Olympics, obviously, in 2012 for a lot of reasons. Which watching Burroughs win, I was in a crowd of Iranians, and he was wrestling Gadarzi. And it was super cool because they were the nicest people ever. And even though they wanted Gadarzi to win so bad, they loved Jordan Burroughs. It's just a really cool experience. And that's also where I met my wife, was at the Olympics. And so that was obviously a really cool trip. But in general, those trips, I look back and it's just all the people that I got to meet. I'm lucky to have friends all over the country, and they're just like you guys where, you meet a wrestler and you get to know them, and then I could call them 5 years from now after not talking to them. They'd have me over and take care of me or whatever. It's just such a good community, and I have friends all over and got to spend time with guys that I just thought, especially that were legends,
Mm-hmm.
that were super cool.
That's kind of one of the funny things about these videos we've been doing, but people are like, oh, how'd you get how'd you get a hold of this guy or that guy or whatever? And it's like, it's not hard at all to get wrestling people to want to talk about wrestling with you, no matter if it's Tom Brands or if it's, you know, one of our friends who lives here locally. Like, Brands would have talked for 3 hours if our internet connection would have held up. It is people. That's kind of the difference, I guess, in the wrestling community. So it's pretty cool.
Well, man, I really appreciate what you guys are doing. I'm gonna try to get through all of them, but you know, I've done some stuff like this in the past, but not too frequently. Well, you guys started doing these, and I was actually watching the Tom Brands one, and he's like, you know, what can you do right now? You know, and I'm not looking at it because I'm not wrestling, but I'm trying to grow these events and trying to GRO Wrestling. And it really, what can you do when this is the current scenario and you have to reflect and you have to find other ways to train and get better. And so I spent a lot of time that evening, you know, and the days after thinking about that. And then, you know, you guys kind of influenced me to start, like the last week, I've been doing a couple of these a day, and the response has been outstanding. It's been really fun because, you know, I'm stuck in my house. So I get to talk to people, but
so is everybody else though. So
yeah. But I've got a good response, and, you know, I'm looking at my analytics. This is working. And so I'm going to keep doing it and tweaking it and finding ways for it to be more engaging and even better. So I appreciate that. I also didn't know about Matt Cox's last MMA fight.
He made us take that. He agreed to that, and then he was like, "Hey, maybe we should mute that one." I was like, "Hey, you knew what you were putting out there. Plus, no one loves to tell a story more than Cox. So if anyone wants to hear any Matt Cox stories, just go talk to him in person. He's got 5 billion stories he could tell you.
Yeah.
You will think some of them are fake, but they are very real. So
can I ask you guys a question or two?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. First for James, like, now you came to wrestling a little bit later in your life, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got kind of a weird experience. I never wrestled in high school or anything like that. Didn't grow up wrestling. Basically, I mean, I knew people that were wrestlers. I'd watch wrestling, and then in college, I was really big into MMA. Like everyone was starting to get at that time, and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna try to do this. I'm gonna try to train MMA." So I kind of tried to do that for a while, and then after I graduated college, I was pretty much just painting houses and training MMA and being broke, living in my parents' basement, and so I tried to do that. I tried to focus on that a lot. Learned some wrestling, learned the other aspects of MMA, and then I realized I wasn't that good at it. So I needed to, and I was broke from painting houses and trying to do that. So I kind of started substitute teaching, and then my buddy was a head coach down in Butler, Missouri, and he asked me to come down there and be his assistant. And so I just kind of learned on the fly. I learned from coaching down there. I coached in Grain Valley. I coached with Jesse. We started going into Mo West, and basically just Flo Wrestling honestly was a huge part of it. Just like consuming any information I could, either from videos or just wrestling every day in practice or talking to coaches or anything. And I mean, it's taken me a long way as far as my knowledge in the last, I don't know, 12 years or whatever. So it's kind of crazy. And I don't ever want to present to people that like I was some good wrestler, because I know everyone in wrestling kind of likes to tell their background, you know, and be like, I did this and this. I don't want anyone to ever try to think that I'm trying to portray that, but hey, I'm a coach, and I've just tried to learn by any means necessary.
What like turned you on to it? What made you want to put the energy into it that you do?
Honestly, it was just an opportunity to get a job initially, because it got me a teaching job, and it seemed interesting. And my degree out of college was in journalism, actually. And at the time I was like, I don't really want to be a journalist. So like I said, I was painting houses, and then my buddy got that head coaching job in Butler, and he was like, I think I'd get you a teaching job down here, actually. And I was like, oh, teaching. All right, cool. Whatever. That's fine. So I've fallen backwards into a lot of opportunities. There haven't always been a very linear path or a plan to how I'm getting there. So
Well, if you want to do any of the journalism stuff, I'd be pumped to team up with you, whether it's something that you're doing or if you ever were interested in doing anything for GRO Wrestling.
that's cool. Yeah, we can talk about that for sure. Right now, it's especially good because we obviously have a lot of free time. So.
Yeah, well, you guys are crushing it. Jesse, how's Arizona? I mean, up until this, the weather got bad.
Yeah, it was good. It's different. There's some differences just in the state association, and the rules that we have are different out here than they were in Missouri. There's basically no restrictions on like contact days or anything like that. So, coming into like the first day of school, I had wrestlers coming into my class, asking, hey, when are we going to start working out? When are we going to start practicing? And I was like, well, just, relax, we'll get started. If you start now, it's going to be a long season, but, yeah, so that's a difference. And then obviously we had 2 practices before spring break, for freestyle and stuff. And then obviously all this hit. So, but it's been pretty, amazing to see the commitment from the kids out here. I think that there's good wrestling out here. There's maybe just not the depth, that they have in Missouri, but, it's been pretty amazing to see the commitment that a lot of the kids, at least at our school, have to it. So that's been fun. And, it's probably like anywhere. There is a wrestling culture at that school. It's had a pretty long tradition of it at Corona del Sol. So that's a good thing to step into, obviously, when there's a culture already there. And then the other neat thing is that we're only a few miles down the road from ASU. And like I said, Zeke Jones's son is going to wrestle for us here in the future. And yeah, it's that's different. You're getting a text every once in a while from Coach Jones, just asking how things are going and talking about his son Jake's excited, and the kids in his grade are excited to come up and wrestle there, and he'll pop his head into a few practices over Christmas break. And so that's a little different, but that's more just based on proximity to them and everything like that. So it's been a good experience so far.
Nice. Zeke Jones is awesome. When Arizona State wrestled Mizzou, he let us come up when they're working out, and Jack got to wrestle with Zeke and Zahid. It was pretty cool. Are you coming to Stampede or what?
Yeah, so we're just kind of waiting on final layout of what that's going to look like. I know that they're talking about changing the format a little bit to
I wanted to run that by you.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I think the big thing that I've talked about with our assistant coaches and with our booster club is if we travel somewhere, just making sure that the kids are going to get X amount of matches so that the travel expenses are worth it. But if we're going to get 5 matches guaranteed or whatever, then it's definitely something we're going to look into very hard. I think the problem is now is that our opportunities to fundraise are going to be minimized right now. So yeah, I think once we know about that, that's definitely something that I want to look into, because it's going to expose our guys to wrestling out there in a different style, maybe that I would consider to be the style out in the Midwest to be different. It's more of a grinder type of style. More West Coast is a little bit slicker, and I think it's just a great thing to go expose them to that different style and really a different pressure in the match, that you don't necessarily feel out here, that constant pressure. And I think it'd be great to do, and especially at that time of the school year and at that time of the season, it's a great time to go out and get that experience. So definitely want to. I've definitely, talked with everybody about it, and they're all about it if we can make it happen.
You know the format? You guys, Jason, tell you guys the format or what?
Haven't heard the final
switching
format.
to a bracket.
All right, so here, you got time for me to run it by you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. And so, first of all, nothing's set in stone. Tons of great teams and coaches that we need to talk to first, but I think everybody's going to love it. So here's what we do. We're going to move up to 64 teams. And then day one is straight double elimination tournament. Now, hear me out before. That way, the reason I want to do that is I think the first day, the pools, they wrestle 5 matches. There's no real progression. The top kids are just like smashing 5 guys. It turns into kind of a long, boring day. This way we can end day 1 with the quarterfinal round, something super exciting. Now, if you go 0-2, 1-1, if you go 0-2, 1-1, or 1-2, there'll be 16 guys that go 0-2. They'll be put into 2 separate 8-man brackets with all the other 0-2 wrestlers, and they'll wrestle back to 8th place. So 3 more matches there. Same thing happens if you're 1-2. 16 of those guys, and you'll be wrestling three more matches against guys that are 1-2. If you're 2-2, there's 8 guys that go 2-2, and you go into 2 4-man brackets, and then you get 2 more matches. So there's this scenario where if a bracket's not full, there could be a bye, but the least amount of matches would be 5. You're probably going to get 6.
Yeah, I love that because you're not overdoing it either. So that tournament's always been such a grind, and James can attest to this, but I've never been huge on putting a kid through that, 8 to 10 matches. I've more been on the side of backing off matches.
Yeah.
And so I love that format. I think that's great.
I think there's a few things. No, I don't think any kid should go 1-7, 1-6.
Right.
Who's going to want to keep wrestling if you do that? And there's a point where it's time to just, hey, let's watch what these guys in the quarters and the semis are doing. And so with this format, I think it's going to suit the highest level guys. They're going to get to better competition faster. But the newer wrestlers, they're going to have a better chance to win a match at Stampede than maybe a lot of local tournaments, because they're going to get to wrestle 3 guys that went 0-2. Only 2 guys per weight class don't win a match. Is the way it'll work out. That also, adding some more teams is going to support the tournament at a higher level, and I think make it more exciting because of the quarterfinal round on Friday. More fans there. I think that it's really great. But like I said, we'll see what everybody else said. The other piece is some coaches have told me, like, if you go to Stampede and you go to Winnetonka, like, you might have to sit out some events.
Half your season, basically, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's the important thing, too. People are trying to focus on match counts more because people are just more aware of the health of the kids. And then B, people in wrestling tend to kind of hang on to past ideas a little too long sometimes. And I think it's good to not be afraid to adjust or change the format of a tournament, to suit the needs of people, which is, I think people realize now that for most part, you don't want your kid to get 8 or 9 matches in a weekend if you're only going to get 45 across the entire season. So,
yeah, we want to build a tournament that people can have success in, but man, I want this Stampede to be the best tournament in the country. Our location's good, our venue's good. And, time to start reaching out to the toughest teams in the country and see how long it takes to get them here. And
it's got a really great history. We were actually watching a video from 2011 or something from when it was called Toshiba or whatever, but it was the same tournament. So it's got a great history. So definitely something to keep growing and maintaining both. So.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, those guys that ran it before have done an excellent job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got a weird story to tell us to wrap this video up? Our final question.
Story.
Unique, weird, funny.
Got weird stories.
It's hard to pick them sometimes.
Yeah.
How weird do you want it?
Make sure it's for public consumption. That's the only requirement we ever place on it.
Apparently, we don't want it Matt Cox weird. We just want it weird, but for a normal person.
Right.
So. Okay. You might have seen footage. It was top secret G14 classified for a while, but Vader released some footage on Flo one night. He didn't archive it. I'll send it to you guys if you want. In 2012 at the Russian Nationals in St. Petersburg, the last night of competition, it ended. And so we go back to our hotel, and we're organizing videos and stuff, and we run into these 3 Russian dudes, and we can't communicate at all. We can't, but somehow we end up in their room, and we're having spirits and raw, like eating raw fish, and we'd been in there for a while. Well, the next thing you know, we're like, nobody's got their shirt on either, so the video's extra weird. But we end up we're doing arm wrestling tournaments, which I beat everybody. But Mark, at the end of the night, this build up to this one match, this one arm wrestling match, it took forever. Finally, they do it. Mark slams it, gets a tough match, gets his hand down. He looks at the camera and he goes, "America!" Like, all right. Well, that night, we went to bed. Well, the next morning we wake up and Mark can't find his computer. We look everywhere. It's got all its content on it too. We transferred from the camera, and well, we look all over. Then we walk out of the room, and there's Mark's sandals. Mark's sandals were in this little lobby area, and so he starts thinking real hard. He's like, "Oh my gosh!" Like he went out there. That's the only place that had internet. He went out there to go upload videos, but what we believe is he fell asleep. He passed out. The same guys, well, those same guys punched a hole in our door earlier that night. So, and they knew we had the computers and stuff. They stole his computer, basically, with all that content on there. And we even posted, we put a sign on the door like, "Hey, if anybody found this computer, we'll give you $1,000." Well, it was the stupidest thing to do. Like, we're in Russia. And the hotel manager's like, "You guys want to get like shanked or something? You guys have money?" Well, we ended up not getting the computer back. Mark found a way to recover a bunch of the matches on the camera's hard drive. But the funny thing, we didn't even know we shot this video. It was like we were back in Austin a few days later, and Mark walks up with this camera. He's like, "We recorded all that." And so it's the arm wrestling matches with these really hammered Russians and interesting commentary. I'll send it to you guys, and it'll all make sense.
Okay. That's good.
I like it.
Well, man, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.
And keep doing what you're doing. And let's keep people engaged while we can't actually wrestle on the mat or anything. So
yeah, real quick, just a big thank you to Blue Chip. Wouldn't be able to do this without those guys. Guns and Jason are amazing, and they really love wrestling and putting shirts on backs. If you need any,
right there.
I think I got one on too.
Yeah.
If you need any wrestling team gear, hit up Blue Chip. Hit me up.
Yeah. Do that for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks,
Gentlemen,
man.
thank you so much. I had a blast.
Yeah, it was good.